You are listening to an exclusive interview on Bass Musician Magazine. The interview starts now.
Hey everybody, this is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist Eric Bass. Now,
Hello.
it is spelled B-A-S-S, but
It is.
the appropriate pronunciation, and it is his real name, people, so that you're not thinking it's a stage name. Eric.
Yeah. Eric Bass. It's like I say, it's either the best or worst bass player name of all time. So
There you go.
I'll leave that up to the viewers.
Well, Eric is joining us from Texas. He's on tour with the Shinedown, and we'll talk a little more about the Shinedown, but let's kind of take a step back. How did you get started in music and playing bass?
Yeah, I grew up in a musical household, so it was just sort of ingrained in me from the beginning. My grandfather was in a big band back in the 40s, and he played with the likes of Tommy Dorsey and people like that. He lived out in California. My mother was extremely musical, through my grandfather, and so we just grew up. I had 4 younger sisters, and we just kind of all grew up around music and singing together and that sort of thing. When I reached a certain age, I remember asking for a guitar for Christmas, and my dad wasn't too happy about it. Dad was a naval commander, so he wasn't too sold on the having the guitar player son at the time, when I was a teenager, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was young. So I remember I got a guitar, and then soon after got a bass. So I just grew up playing both instruments at the same time. I loved writing my own instrumental music and recording it and that sort of thing. I remember when I was a kid, I thought I had invented the multi-track recorder because I went and stole my sister, didn't steal, but borrowed my sister's stereos. Each one of us had a stereo system, and I would link them together, and I'd record one thing into this stereo, and I'd play that stereo back into the other one, but I'd play over top of it and just kind of had this loop going, So bass was just always, something that, helped me realize my bigger vision, I guess, for just writing instrumental songs, because I was way into instrumentalists at the time, and the Steve Vai's and the Joe Satriani's and the Eddie Van Halen's but then on the bass player front, the Billy Sheehan's and the Stu Hams and T.M. Stevens and people like that, that I was really into the players. I just sort of learned bass as I learned guitar and as I learned piano, and just kind of learned all these instruments at the same time.
So are you self-taught pretty much?
Yeah, I've had one guitar lesson in my life, and this guy, man, I'm sure he meant well, but he started getting into technique and all this stuff out of the gate, and my hands were in the wrong position, and I just wasn't interested in that.
Gotcha. It's interesting with music because so many times it kind of comes up, it's like a language. And I consider it the universal language because you can relate to people all over the world, even if you're not speaking the exact same language. But when it comes to music, we can all kind of find common ground. And more often than not, like a language, many people learn how to play before they learn the technical or the theories, kind of like with grammar is to language. And in some cases, you could certainly spend a lifetime without diving deep into the theoretical parts of it because you're fluent in a practical way. And, learning is an ongoing process as you continue to play with new bands and, find new challenges.
Right. I mean, theory is something that I did learn. I mean, I was in band. I played in drumline in high school. Theory is an integral part of communicating with other musicians. As far as being a songwriter goes and a player, I think that if I were more plugged into the technical side of music, more into the theory side, it might cloud the songwriting a little bit, because then you get into what might be a cool move to make, or something that would impress your musician friends or something. Mm-hmm. It's a great tool to have. Like I say, when I'm writing string parts or trying to communicate with string players, it's good to know the language and how to communicate with them in the way that they speak to each other. So it's a great thing to know. It's a great tool to have. I mean, I think every musician should at least maybe go online and take a Theory 101 or 102 class and learn the basics, because it's a great communication skill. I don't think about that stuff when I'm playing or when I'm writing. It's actually very interesting with the bass. I don't think in notes so much on bass. I think in patterns. Something like piano or guitar, I'll look down and think about notes or chords or the names of this chord and this note and this whatever. But with the bass, for some reason, I've always just seen patterns, and I know in the key that I'm in, I can go here, 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 and here. But I'm not really thinking about what note it is. And sometimes if somebody will say, well, play, we're in this key and play this, and it'll throw me for a loop for a second, because I have to turn my brain on and think about those things. It's always been kind of funny the way the bass is different like that for me.
With a lot of, especially I find, and I'll say a lot in rock, there is a lot of players that have gone kind of more the route of hands-on, learning as you go. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. I mean, some people will start out and go to a formal school and then end up rocking. Others will start out playing in their neighborhood, sitting under a street lamp or something, and pick up a band and be busy from there on out. You never know. Moving on to the Shinedown, you're actually the second bassist. The band's been going since about 2001, if I understand correctly.
Yep.
And
Correct.
You joined about, 6 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, 2007.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been a minute, yeah.
Longer than that. With that, you guys have a new album coming up in May, Attention.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that project.
Attention for me it was just an absolute labor of love. I produced it, I mixed it, did a lot of the instrumentation on it as well. And it's really the band's first concept record. There's a bigger story wrapped up with the songs, and it's very autobiographical. A lot of it's about Brent and myself, and we kind of came off of touring the album Amaryllis a few years ago, and we kind of hit a wall and fell apart. And Brent fell back into drug addiction and alcoholism, and I fell into deep depression, which I deal with. And really, it's about how we kind of fell into a hole and figured out how to dig ourselves out. But put into a form where the listener can take those songs and those lyrics and apply it to themselves and really have something tangible that they can apply to their own life. Musically, I have to say it's probably the most intense record we've done. It's a weighty record. It's heavy, and I don't always mean heavy as in fast and heavy songs. I mean, it's got that, but just the subject matter has a lot of weight, and the feel, even the songs that aren't speed heavy, have a lot of girth and weight to them, sonically and lyrically. We're very proud of it, and can't wait for the world to hear the rest of it.
There's a couple of terms that you use that I think really aptly describe the music that I'm hearing on this album. It's heavy. It is intense. It is. You totally get the bass pattern because the songs. That is the foundation that these songs are built on. As a matter of fact, the Human Radio. Yep. It's just the bass and the vocals opening up, right. and so it totally catches my attention. Going, hey, wait, there it is. It's a very strong lattice of that groove, laying it down, but it's aggressive too. What I'm listening to, how this is punching through it. It's the kind of thing that I would almost expect people to be like jumping up and down while they listen to it. It just makes you gotta move, you gotta jump, maybe wash somebody up in the air or something.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the intensity of the record goes, we toured with Iron Maiden in the UK last year, and it was sort of an add-on to our record cycle. We were pretty much done, and we got this opportunity to go tour Europe, mainland Europe, and the UK in arenas with Iron Maiden. And being in the United States, so often you can become inundated with opinions like rock is dead, and the rock and roll and metal fans they're just part of a subgenre now, and it can become a little disheartening to hear that. We went over there, and it's sold out arenas night after night of just these amazing fans with this amazing energy, and a lot of kids and a lot of youth. They really took to us, which we didn't expect. We'd heard horror stories about Iron Maiden audiences, but they really took to us and just gave us this amazing reception. Coming back from that Iron Maiden tour, bringing that intensity back to the studio, I really wanted to inject that into our record. Thankfully, I guess we were only about a third of the way done writing when we came back from Maiden. So the first thing I came back and wrote was Devil. We kind of got into that, and then that intensity just kind of stayed in there from then on. And I kept those people and those crowds in my mind's eye, and just really wanting to not in a fan service kind of way or anything, but just experiencing that type of love for the genre. And believe me, we have amazing fans in the United States. I mean, we played sold out amphitheaters here in the U.S. It's not that. It's almost like a middle finger to everybody who wants rock and roll to go away. That intensity, I think, just really worked its way into the musical side of this record, and that coupled with the subject matter and the lyrics and the intensity of that, and the intensity of that experience of going through what Brent went through and what I went through and what we put into the record with lyrics, it just makes it a really intense experience. You know, you're talking about the bass on human radio. I mean, that's the kind of the pulse, and that's what sort of sparked that. Was the human radio is supposed to be your heartbeat, you know, and what's a better heartbeat than a bass, right? That's kind of where that idea came from, to start that song with a bass rather than anything else. You know, it's like let's create a pulse. Let's create, you know, let's make this thing move. That's actually my 1967 EB bass that I've got, a hollow body EB that I love, man. That's actually that bass throughout the whole song. Even all the heavy stuff is on that hollow body. It's a cool piece, man. It's actually, that bass is the first instrument that when I had joined Shinedown back in 2007, I got like my first check in the bank, you know, and I could go. I'd never been able to walk into a vintage guitar shop and just buy whatever I wanted to buy. And that was the first time I'd ever been able to do that. And my wife and I were in New York City, and we walked into Chelsea Guitars, and I picked that bass up, and it was hanging, you know, I was like, this is it. And a very unique thing happened, because at the time, I take the bass up to the countertop, and G.E. Smith had walked in, who was the guitar player for the Saturday Night Live band at the time, for years and years and years. And he was standing there at the counter, and I put the bass up there, and he goes, I think that's one of Jack's basses, Jack Cassidy. And I'm like, that's really effing cool, man, you know? He's like, I remember it because it was drilled out on both sides. It could have been played left-handed or right-handed. And he's like, I remember him doing that to one of his basses. He's like, I think this was Jack's, and he's just offering me this information, you know, because they both, I guess, would shop at that store. It was really cool. So anyway, that's the bass that's actually on the recording is that, and that's just the intro is it's just DI'd through a V76 tube preamp, so it's just straight in, man.
Since we're on the topic of gear, you mentioned this particular bass. How do you what gear are you using to get your voice?
Live right now, I played the SVT4s Ampegs for a long time with the graphic EQ in them. I was on those for a few years, and then I went through two 810 cabs, the more the vintage style cabs. I just like to look. My B rig over in Europe, I just have the 7 Pros, you know, which don't have the graphic EQ on them. And, you know, I've always been a pretty simple guy when it comes to gear. Like, when it comes to guitar, I just like a JCM 800 with a few knobs on the front. I don't want it to be overdone. And I just realized that my European rig was sounding better than my U.S. rig was. And so when I came back to the U.S., I got rid of the 4s and put the 7s in my main rig. And I just love the way they sound, man. I just love the simplicity of it. I have switched over the end of the last record. I'd always played sort of the Ernie Ball style basses with the double coil active pickups in them, and I've just really, you know, I don't know if it's age or what it is, but I've gravitated toward more of the 51P bass or telly bass style basses that just have the one single coil pickup in the middle. And so I'm using quarter pounders in those basses now. So I've got a lot of Nashes and Fenders, and I've got a prototype bass right now I've been working on with a company called Prestige. They're out of Canada. I've been playing their acoustic guitars for a long time, and they came to me about maybe designing a bass, so we're working on that, kind of built around that single coil design, so excited about that as well. My rig is pretty simple. Rather than having a distortion pedal that I cut on with the bass, I use a separate guitar rig. I've always found with gain on a bass, anytime that you add gain to your tone, you're going to lose bottom end, or you're going to lose something somewhere. I just add to what I've already got. I've got 2 Mojo Tone Deacon heads, guitar heads, and I'm running those through a Mojo Tone 112 ISO cabinet off to the side of the stage, and just running those heads at a time. You know, I have one for a backup. So my gain sound is just, I just cut those off, or, you know, cut them on or off, and it just adds to what's already there. I just really love the way that sounds. I'm running some sub-octave type tones, like if you listen to human radio, that when it gets into the big chorus choir part, you know, that there's a sub bass riding underneath it. But in the studio, I actually used an analog synthesizer for. I literally went in and like played the bass line, and then I went in and dubbed in like exactly underneath what the bass was playing, because I couldn't find a pedal that sounded the way I wanted it to sound. But live, I don't have that luxury. So, but the Digitech's now making a bass whammy, which is great. I traditionally just use a red guitar whammy pedal for that stuff, but the bass whammy, it leaves way more of the integrity of the low end. But the Digitech pedal just tracks so well. You know, I've tried all these other octave pedals for bass that are made for that from other companies, and I'll hit the note, and then 2 seconds later, the sub will kick in. It's not tracking the right way. Digitech just has it down, man. They know what to do. You know, I've got that on my pedal board. I've got a bass wah pedal in my pedal board on this tour. And that's really it. You know, those 3: the channel switcher, the sub, and the wah. I really like to keep it simple.
Gotcha.
With bass, like I always tell, and I don't get bent out of shape about if something's going wrong with my rig or something. You know, my tech Hoogie is great. He keeps me in line. Everything's I mean, 99.9% of the time everything works fine. But I just always tell him, I'm like, if something goes down, just run a DI, man. As long as it's making bass noises, we're gonna be right. For me, it's always been about the songs. The fans don't care if my rig's working or not, as long as there's noise coming out of it. I just try to take that attitude of I used to there was a time, man, where I get bent out of shape if something happened. I think I've just maybe mellowed a little bit. But yeah, man, I'm just always more concerned about the song, I guess, than my rig and the gear and all that stuff. So.
Well, and so many times it's not as much what happens, but how you react to what's happening.
Sure.
And
man, I've had times when I walk out there and I get ready to hit the downbeat and nothing comes out of my rig. Maybe there's got to switch the pack over or there's a problem. But there's no point turning around and giving somebody an evil look.
Yeah.
It's like, just act like nothing's wrong. And I understand it's going to be different if someone is playing a gig where they're responsible for their gear. They have to figure it out.
Sure.
I'm not saying everybody should just forget about their sound or anything. If something goes wrong at a live gig. As a professional, I'm just going to act like everything's fine, and I've got my guy over here who's going to help me figure it out. But there's a lesson in that, even for someone who is gigging out every night and doing covers or whatever, or playing their own original music. Don't let that stuff get in your head. Like, if something goes wrong, keep a good attitude about it. Something like that can ruin your whole night if you let it. It's the great thing about bass, man. If something goes down, you can say DI. You can always just go straight forward and still make noise. So.
Gotcha. Well, and right now, again, the album is dropping. I've seen the 2 videos, the Human Radio, which is making an interesting statement on the cell phone kind of situation, as more and more of us go out and notice that people are, even though they're together, they're just paying so much attention to their cell phones.
Yeah.
And
that's what I said, that the human radio is your heartbeat. So it's about plug more into each other and not get so consumed by that. And that song takes place toward the end of the record. It's next to the last song on the record, actually. But it's a lot of my depression issues didn't stem from this, but weren't helped by the fact that you get online and people are just spewing hate at each other and they don't really have any humanity. They're saying things to each other online they'd never say in person.
Of course.
And so they're buried in their phone. And the song isn't so much about that, but it's about the video really brings that in, which I love. It's just about remembering that we're all human and that we share this pulse. And that's why at the end of the song, you see everybody throw their phones down and they're just walking in the same direction. These few select individuals decide to unplug, and that's what's important, is just to remember to treat each other well and to be human beings,
Gotcha. And you guys are touring right now. What plans do you have for the future?
Touring, and more. We got a lot of European stuff coming up, a lot of UK stuff coming up. We'll be getting into Japan and Australia and those places probably in 2019. I mean, I'm not going home until September, I know that. So we're going to be... We're out for a long time, but it feels great, man. It's nice to have people excited about this record. This feels different. The excitement around the label and around the band and around people wanting to talk about the record and it's the buzz is something we haven't experienced probably since the Sound of Madness. We're out here to work and we're out here to bring the record to the world. And
if people want to know what's going on, the latest news, where you're touring, www.shinedown.com.
Shinedown.com, @Shinedown on Twitter and Instagram. I am at ebassprod, as in production, EBASSPROD on Twitter and Instagram. Come check it out, man.
Well, Eric, we appreciate you taking time from your tour. It's always hard to find a little moment to chat. But folks, you've seen him here, Eric Bass, Shinedown, coming to you live on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thanks for bassing out with us here on bassmusicianmagazine.com.